Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's news. Starting off as usual with wars and rumors of wars. On Monday, last week, October 20th, dozens of Houthis were killed, injured, and arrested as violence intensified in Yemen's central city of Bayda, where militants from the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, that's the AQAP, and the Zaidi Houthi group continued to fight. Informed sources said the Al-Qaeda militants escalated their battles and attacks, including car bombs against Houthi militants, killing, wounding, and arresting more than 80 Houthis. Then, last Tuesday, October 21st, almost 40 jihadists were killed in Benghazi via airstrikes by Libyan aviation. And in Iraq, the IS advanced on Mount Sinjar, tightening a siege of thousands of stranded Yazidis who called on the United States and its allies to avert more bloodshed. The attack was the latest threat to the Yazidis, thousands of whom have been shot, buried alive, or sold into slavery by the IS, who regard them as devil worshippers. Then on Wednesday, October 22nd, Turkey agreed to allow up to 200 heavily armed Peshmerga fighters to enter into the city of Kobani in order to fight the Islamic State in Syria. Then Libyan army troops pushed into Benghazi. This is the first time in 2 months that government forces had entered the eastern city, which has been under the control of the IS. The advance was a significant boost to the troops, though fighting was still raging in Benghazi, and the army has a long battle ahead. On Thursday, October 23rd, self-defense forces in eastern Ukraine began plans to retake cities of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Mariupol. Periods of intense hostilities will follow. Then on Friday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on the 24th that 1,300 FSA fighters, that's the Free Syrian Army, would join the Kurds in defending Kobani from an assault by the Islamic State. The Syrian Kurds have accepted 1,300 people from the Free Syrian Army, and they are holding talks to determine the transit route. Then, on Saturday, October 25th, a state of emergency was declared in parts of North Sinai after at least 31 members of the Egyptian security forces were killed in 2 separate attacks. 28 soldiers were killed, and another 30 were injured when a car bomb exploded. Kurdish forces retook the northern Iraqi town of Zumar and several nearby villages from the Islamic State early on Saturday after heavy coalition airstrikes against the Islamist insurgents. Peshmerga forces advanced from the 5 directions in the early morning and encountered fierce resistance, but ultimately they prevailed, and Zumar is now in Kurdish hands. Also on Saturday, in Cairo, British police arrested 4 men accused of plotting a large-scale bombing. Australian authorities arrested a ring of 12 accused of plotting daring murders as well as a public beheading. And in Canada, a gunman assaulted the Parliament building and killed a soldier guarding a war memorial. And a motorist struck 2 soldiers, killing 1. In both cases, perpetrators had tenuous links to the IS. Further, in New York City, a man wielding a hatchet attacked 4 police officers in Queens, slashing one in the head and another in the arm, in the name of Islam. On Sunday, October 26th, Lebanese Army helicopter gunships blasted ISIS hideouts in North Lebanon as fighting in the city's old souks intensified sharply overnight. The death toll from 3 days of fighting between Lebanese troops and the Islamic State rose to 18 as the military cracked down on the IS's plots to attack Tripoli and the northern district of Minyeh. This series of episodes over just these past 4 weeks says a lot about the capacity of the Islamic State to catalyze lone wolf attacks conceived and carried out by individuals or small groups around the Western world who may have little or no actual connection to the Islamic State, but who have been inspired by ISIS propaganda. Now, for the following, I give special thanks to Dr. Guy Bechor. Like a regular mantra, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has a habit of saying that the Israeli-Palestinian issue cannot remain unchanged. But, strangely enough, he isn't saying that about the conflict in Syria, where the death toll is on its way to the 250,000 mark, with people being slaughtered, beheaded, and dying in various ways. And he isn't saying that about 4 million refugees and 10 million displaced people from Syria. He isn't saying that about the Islamic State, which is beheading people and butchering minorities. He isn't saying that about Iraq, which has been torn to pieces, or about Baghdad's airport, which is about to fall into the hands of jihadist terror. He isn't saying that about Libya, a country controlled by a coalition of insane jihadist organizations on the verge of Europe. And he isn't saying that about Yemen, which has died and is controlled by wild tribes navigated by a behind-the-scenes smiling Iran. He isn't saying that about the intolerable uranium enrichment in Tehran, which has him and the West wrapped around its little finger. And he isn't saying that about Russia either, which not only conquered eastern Ukraine, but also annexed the huge Crimea region. It isn't an occupation, after all, that only exists in Israel. And he isn't saying that about Turkey, which brutally conquered 1/3 of the island of Cyprus and still controls the area. Nor is he saying that about China, which is slowly turning Tibet into a region inhabited by Chinese. He isn't saying that about Hezbollah, which is piling up tens of thousands of missiles on Israel's border. He isn't saying that about Qatari friends, who are cunningly funding the terror that the United States is fighting against. He isn't saying that about Hamas either, which proudly announced that it is rebuilding its network of terror tunnels targeting Israeli territory. He is only saying that about Israel, the only safe, stable, democratic place one can rely on in the Middle East. It was John Kerry, who was Syrian President Bashar Assad's personal friend and sat down with him many times for intimate meetings. It was John Kerry, in his former position as chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, who worked to return the American ambassador to Damascus to pressure Israel, with the price being the Golan Heights, of course. The question is, why is he always singling out Israel of all the nations in the world? Could it be that it pains him to see Israel secure and thriving, and that's why he has such an urge to weaken it? To sell it to a Palestinian gang whose only goal is to weaken Israel and then resume the fighting against it after it crumbles? Can't he hear the leader of this gang, Mahmoud Abbas, referring to the Jews as impure as they are defiling the Temple Mount when they visit it? Can't he see the law sentencing a Palestinian to death for daring to sell a house to a Jew? Perhaps the foreign minister of the United States would care to explain to us why he is singling Israel and the Jews out of all the nations. Well said, Dr. Guy Bechor. And last of all, signs in the heavens. The biggest sunspot on the face of the sun in more than 2 decades unleashed a major flare on Friday, October 24th, reaching its peak at 5:41 p.m. Eastern Time, 21:41 Greenwich Mean Time, and triggered a strong radio blackout at the time. The flare erupted from a giant active sunspot and was classified as an X3.1 class solar storm, one of the most powerful types of solar storms on the sun. But it is not the first time the sunspot has made its presence known. This is the 4th substantial flare from this active region since Sunday, October 19th. And that's the news for this week, my friends. As always, I hope and I pray that this information is a beracha to you and yours. And, Abba willing, I'll see you next week. Until then, shalom, my friends. Crowded rooms, I need more space than I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath a naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.